September. I think it's my favorite month in the Alberni Valley, in part because there is just so much going on. We have these wonderful bright blue sky days. Nights are a little bit cooler, but there's still time in the evening to get together with friends. Our show today is chock full of stories about everything that is going on. Grain being harvested, farmers battling pest infestations, and wonderful stories about people who have made and are making a difference in their communities. Really, there's so much going on. Why would you want to be anywhere else except here, where you live? Wayne Smith is a happy man. As the owner of Vancouver Island Grain and Milling, he is passionate about farming and does custom harvesting as well as working his own fields. And today, today he's preparing to cut about 15 acres of fall rye, just outside of the city of Port Alberni.
We don't need to have huge acreages for grain, but we need to have something that's not an acre or two. We need like 20, 30 acres is ideal.
Now, 20 or 30 acres may be just fine, but in fact, the field Wayne is working on today is part of a larger, newly cleared piece of land.
So we got more coming down the road, and over on the bench behind us here, we got a whole bunch of cleared land that I'm just so excited to be able to put some grain in on there starting this fall.
Wayne is excited because every additional acre seeded down in grain brings his dream of sustainable and ongoing grain production on Vancouver Island closer to reality.
We got big enough fields we can really kind of fine-tune and get this whole project, the grain project, which is a Vancouver Island-wide project, by the way. It's not just me. There's quite a few of us involved in this. I work with farmers in Courtenay all the way down to Duncan and Victoria, and we're all very keen on getting more grain in production on Vancouver Island. And this is just an excellent opportunity.
It is an opportunity. Wayne and the other farmers have been working at this project for several years, and he sees the need for local grain production increasing.
Right now what's happening in the prairies because of the drought, that we're looking at a lot of failure in the grain. They didn't get enough moisture to fill the heads. There's going to be a reduced yield by a lot. Now there's a need to start having more local so that we don't have our eggs in one basket, and there's this buy local thing. Everybody wants food that is local. People want to know where their food's coming from right now, and in this location right here, being on the edge of town, is visible.
It is visible, and as Wayne will tell you, this harvest is also in high demand.
This grain is going right to my facility, right kitty corner to this operation. I have a grain cleaning plant over there. We rebag it into totes, down into small sacks if needed, and we sell it. Most of the grain here will go out to bakeries. And that's without even addressing the need for the micro distilleries that are all popping up all over BC, especially on Vancouver Island, and they're just crying for grain.
This particular crop is fall rye, planted last September, and it's those fall crops that seem to be best suited to Vancouver Island.
Barley, I did some fall spelt last year, fantastic, very high value. So there are a lot of grains that are suited to Vancouver Island, and of course for the spring plantings, oats. If you can even get on the ground and get oats in the ground, it just grows fantastic here. The market for grain is just getting stronger and stronger. I've been doing it for 10 years and I don't even advertise, and every day my phone rings with brand new customers. We've got pre-sales before it even gets planted.
It sounds like a dream come true for any farmer, but according to Wayne, this is just the beginning.
You know, this is a long-term venture. It has more, as we learn more, we're going to become better at it for our local area. Growing grain here is not like in the prairies. There are different issues and there are different things we need.
If you'd like to find out more about growing grain on Vancouver Island, contact Wayne. He would love to talk to you about it. 2 acres is a pretty little farm just outside of Port Alberni, known for its Black Angus cattle. It also produces forage, acres of hay to feed those cows.
My dad had like an 800 to 1,000 bale cut, his second cut, and it was thigh high. And then all of a sudden, the guys were unpacking hay bales from the first cut in the barn on a Wednesday night, and they saw the worms coming across the concrete. And then by the next morning, you could see that the hayfield was beginning to thin out.
And by the end of the next day, that lush, thigh-high field of hay had been eaten down to stubble.
I'll never forget it, 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, about 32 degrees. It was just bare stubble left and about this high, and there was an adult armyworm on every piece of stubble as far as the eye could see. It was like a sea of worms. We had all the old timers in Port Alberni come, and they were shaking their heads. They'd never seen anything like that before.
Eventually, after researching the pest online, Megan and other farmers identified it as a true armyworm. But even though they were sure, the Ministry of Agriculture took some convincing. After all, no one had ever seen armyworms in this number on Vancouver Island before.
The outbreak levels we've seen this year is unprecedented. No one seems to remember ever seeing this before in hay crops on the island. However, there are records of this moth being collected on Vancouver Island in the Royal BC Museum for the last 150 years.
Which begs the question, why have they shown up this year in such numbers?
It's hard to say. The moth flies up in April on wind currents or on storm systems in April, May from the southern areas, Mexico and southern United States. And so it came up on some storm, though it's hard to predict if that could happen in the future or when it might happen.
When we visited Tooth Acres, the worms had already gone into their pupae stage, and Tracy stressed that understanding their life cycle is key to controlling armyworms.
The armyworm is a danger in the first generation of larvae, and that occurs from late April, May, June, and then they pupate in this area in mid-July. So the damage time is mostly June.
Tooth Acres was not alone in facing this pest. At the height of the infestation, Alberni Valley farmers were counting 150 armyworms per square foot in their fields, giving this area the dubious claim to being hardest hit of any community across the island.
The damage was significant at variable levels throughout Vancouver Island, from Comox Valley all the way down to Cowichan Valley, and I think Port Alberni was the hardest hit area that we know of.
All of which leaves Vancouver Island farmers wary about this new challenge to their livelihood.
I don't know, because they're here for the first time. We don't know what the mild weather will do with the pupa, how the cocoons will do.
There are several biological controls for armyworms, such as parasitic wasps, as well as insecticides. But these are reactive controls and depend on an accurate and early forecast of an outbreak.
What we've endeavored to do, and we're starting in August of this year, is set up pheromone traps to trap for the moths so that we collectively get a better understanding of how long the moth flight is and when we can expect the second generation of larvae. And the larvae then will occur in August. And then next spring, we'll be able to use the same traps and the same system to watch for moths that blow in April and May next year. So that's one way that we're going to at least keep people informed and try to anticipate further damage. The other way is looking for larvae, and that's a visual inspection a couple weeks after moth flight starts, and we're able to go and look in the new grass, into the new lush growth grass, and look for new larvae. And if we see a threshold number over 5 per square foot, then the farmer might want to think about cutting early, grazing, or even an insecticide spray at that point.
Local updates on the Alberni Valley armyworm situation can be found on the Facebook page ACRD What's on Your Fork, or contact Tracy Hippolyzer directly. In Port Alberni, I'm Nancy Wilmot. It's not easy being young. What with school and social pressures, just finding your place in the world can be tough. And for LGBTQ youth, it can be even more difficult. But there is a new 8-week support group starting in Port Alberni this fall that just might help.
Gender Journeys is a support group that supports individuals that consider themselves transgender, genderqueer, or identify as non-binary.
Gender Journeys is a pilot project from Transcare BC, and it's being offered locally through Alberni Drug and Alcohol Prevention Services.
We have always supported the LGBTQ youth community at ADAPS. Alberni Drug and Alcohol Prevention Service does not necessarily mean that everybody that comes through our doors struggles with drugs or alcohol. So much of the work that we do in our community and the work that we do for the youth and families in our community is health promotion. We recognized that LGBTQ youth needed a community and a place to belong and a place to invest and feel good. And it has been running for almost 13 years, Wild Youth. Suddenly, this year, we had an opportunity to apply to be one of the pilot sites of the Transcare BC Gender Journeys pilot.
This is a free 8-week program featuring speakers and counselors and plenty of support.
The purpose of Gender Journeys is to support trans individuals. But what's special about this Gender Journeys pilot is that it's being adapted to youth. So right now, our country and, well, the world is at a tipping point in trans rights. Transgender individuals are sparking conversation about human rights and healthcare rights and wellness. So in the 20 years I've been working with youth, just in the last 2 years is when I've had to go, okay, what does it mean to be genderqueer? Okay, what does it mean to be non-binary? What does it mean to the young people that are living it? So a group like Gender Journeys is going to be a safe place where they can explore all of what it means to be transgender, all of what it means to be genderqueer or non-binary, and explore the social constructs of gender and what the myths are around how we must live.
Intrigued? Then call Deborah. This is a free group, but space is limited and it's important to pre-register. Sharon Hillman has a passion for telling people stories, for transcribing their life experiences so they can be shared either in personal biographies or as part of larger volumes. And today, she's meeting with John Kasanoff, who, after a lifetime of working in the logging industry, has plenty of stories to tell.
Well, I started out on a farm. My dad had a big dairy farm, and I worked on the farm for 2 years after school. But I had wanted to drive big trucks from grade 1. So I couldn't stand any longer. I had to leave at 20 years old, just 20, and I learned to drive trucks immediately and went on from there in logging trucks.
John did love those logging trucks, and in 1965 he started his own company.
Of course, I had all the different brands, and often I bought them used, well used, because I couldn't afford new ones. And you found the weaknesses in them as you repaired them.
In fact, John knew those trucks and their weaknesses inside out and was always sure that a better truck, more suitable for work in the woods, could be built. It was a challenge that he returned to some years later when tragedy struck.
I lost a son in the bush after many years of logging at Kennedy Lake, and I needed something that would consume me, and I didn't want to log anymore, so I left my partner Eric Netzer logging in our biggest camp above Tofino, and sold the one at Kennedy Lake, and proceeded to go to Vancouver to buy a drafting table and come home and sit up here all by myself in the shop and design the Challenger truck.
That truck that John designed, the Challenger truck, was different and bigger than anything else working in the woods at the time, touted as being at least 30% tougher than the rest of them. And there are still some in use around the world.
The basic idea was logging. We built trucks and trailers, and we have one in Australia pulling 300-ton trailers, there again iron ore, and we have in Guatemala. I don't even know what they're hauling there, but anyway, we have a couple in Guatemala, 5 in the tar sands. They love our trucks on big low beds in the pits at Fort McMurray.
Now, we started off this segment by talking about Sharon Hillman's passion for storytelling. But this time, she's part of a committee compiling the stories of men and women who, like John, spent their lives working in the logging industry.
I was the last of our committee members to meet him. He's created this magnificent machine, and he's a man of beyond passionate. He just glows with life.
Well, there's no denying that John is passionate about his life's work. And as it turns out, that isn't unusual among the folks that the committee interviewed for this book.
This community exists because of those men and women who put their boots on the ground out in the woods. We stand now in awe of what these people have done. There have been many books written about the logging industry in the Alberni Valley, but this is the first one that comes directly from the folks who were there.
It is a unique book. The personal stories of over 70 men and women who worked in the woods during the heyday of the forest industry. It's also a fundraiser for the Alberni Valley Hospice Society. Vital Voices Alberni Valley Loggers can be pre-ordered now for pickup after November 30th. A wonderful way to honor the history of this community and the people who made that history. Lionel Cyr was born in 1935, the youngest of 9 boys in a French-speaking family from Saskatchewan, and he well remembers the move to Port Alberni, a trip he took by train alone with his father, ahead of the rest of the family.
And when we got to Jasper, the train stopped there for 2 hours, and my dad said, "I'm gonna go for a walk, you stay here." And I wanted to go with him, but no, you stay here. And 2 hours later, the conductor came around saying, "All aboard," and no papa.
No papa, and young Lionel, not speaking enough English to communicate with the conductor. Panicked, the little boy bolted, searching the streets for his father until, desperate to make someone understand, he ran back to the train platform one more time.
And I said to the conductor again, "No papa," while he said something, I don't know what he said. And he grabbed me by the arm and pushed me into the train, and there was Dad inside.
Yes, Papa was there. He'd come back a different way, and he and Lionel had missed each other. But even as a little boy, Lionel knew the truth. His dad hadn't just gone for a walk.
He didn't want me to go with him because he found a water hole, we call it. But Dad had a weakness with alcohol. It's something that I inherited later in life. But my dad couldn't do nothing about his drinking, but I did.
Now Lionel is quick to point out that he loved his dad, that he was a good man with a weakness for alcohol. And although he and his brothers were regularly called to walk their dad home from the bar, it wasn't something they talked about.
We paid attention to our parents. If they said jump, we jump, and that's the way it was.
In many ways, it wasn't surprising that Lionel drank a lot. After all, he'd started drinking with his dad. But where his father couldn't see that his behavior affected anybody else, Lionel could. At 25, he'd married the love of his life, and he couldn't live with what he saw reflected in her eyes.
I used to come home, I was impaired. And I could see by the look on her face that I was a disgrace. And that worked on me for a long time before I finally decided that's enough. And it was in 1962.
1962. Lionel sought out a friend who he knew attended AA, Alcoholics Anonymous.
And that's when I admitted to him that I had a drinking problem. He said, "Good, now we can talk."
They did talk, and that friend became Lionel's sponsor. And although it took years for Lionel to speak of his alcoholism outside of AA, he's never looked back.
All my friends I used to drink with, they're all gone. And some of them were likable, but they drank the way I did. Couldn't find the bottom of a bottle, it seemed.
This year, Lionel marked his 55th year of sobriety, an anniversary so rare that when a commemorative medallion was ordered, it had to be specially made because they're just not kept on hand.
Today, I have absolutely no regrets for the last 55 years that I've been sober. I can honestly say I've never had a bad homecoming in the last 55 years.
So much going on, so much that has been going on, so much yet to come. September is chock full of everything. You've got the big three. You've got Salmon Festival, which is happening in a new location this year, right behind me at Tyee Landing. Then you've got the Fall Fair, and then you've got the Toy Run, where this year riders are being invited to and welcome to Canada's most rider-friendly city. Now that's something to be proud of, where you live.